You owe me your life, Althea, so the absolute least you can do is sign over that house to save your mother from the streets. That was the exact message my mother, Francine, dropped into our family group chat of 26 relatives on a Saturday morning. She told everyone that I was mercilessly evicting her from her home, demanding the title to my $1,200,000 house as an apology gift to pay back her lifelong sacrifices. When she gave me an ultimatum in that digital town square to sign my house over by Friday or be permanently disowned, I did not argue. I simply uploaded one single photograph. Within minutes, her meticulously crafted lies completely shattered, and what my grandmother did to her afterward was absolutely merciless. Welcome to Revenge Silent. Thank you for watching this video. Before I take you back there, do me one small favor. Take a second to like and subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is where you are. It helps more than you know. My name is Althea. I am 33 years old, and for my entire life, I have been the designated scapegoat in a family that treated my older brother like absolute royalty. I work as a corporate investigator in Seattle, spending my days hunting down missing money and exposing lies in ledgers. But in my family, my skills meant nothing. My mother, Francine, functioned as the supreme queen of our family empire, dictating who was worthy of love and who was destined to serve. My brother, Desmond, was her golden child. He was 35 years old, chronically unemployed, and completely convinced of his own staggering genius. When the notification chimed on my phone that Saturday morning, I was standing in the kitchen of the home I had purchased entirely on my own. I looked at the long, dramatic paragraph Francine had posted. She painted a profound picture of absolute victimhood, claiming that I had secretly purchased her mortgage debt just to throw her out into the cold. My aunts and uncles immediately swarmed the chat. They called me a monster. They called me heartless. They demanded I hand over my property to atone for my supposed cruelty. I did not shed a single tear. I felt entirely icy. Growing up, I would have crumbled under the weight of their collective disappointment, begging for a scrap of their approval. But looking at the screen, my professional instincts flared to life. Francine had always bragged about paying off her house a decade ago. She wore her debt-free status like a glittering crown. If she was suddenly facing the streets, and if she needed a house worth over $1 million to quietly replace her own, she was hiding an immense financial disaster. She was looking for a snare, and she wanted me to be the prey. I refused to be hunted. I muted the chaotic group chat, walked over to my desk, and opened my laptop. I pulled up the public property records for King County. It took me less than 5 minutes to find the truth hiding beneath her shiny facade. 2 years ago, Francine had taken out a massive line of credit against her home for $500,000. 4 weeks ago, the bank had issued a formal notice of default. She really was losing her house. But the numbers did not add up. If she owed $500,000, why was she trying to extort a house worth more than double that amount? People who are simply drowning in debt ask for a life vest, but Francine was demanding an entire luxury yacht. There was a staggering discrepancy in the math, and in my line of work, a missing hole that large means someone is desperately trying to cover their tracks. The next afternoon, the missing puzzle piece walked right through the glass doors of my office building. Desmond marched into the lobby dressed in a designer suit he could not afford, looking every bit the fake technology entrepreneur he pretended to be. He stormed past the receptionist and pointed a trembling finger at my face. "Mom is losing everything because you refuse to support my vision," he screamed, his voice echoing off the marble walls. I looked at him, completely unbothered. "Security is on the way, Desmond. You have to sign that house over," he spat, his face turning a furious shade of red. "My investors pulled out, the market crashed, and now my company is underwater. If you do not give Mom your house, we are both ruined." As the security guards grabbed his arms and dragged him backward toward the sliding doors, he had given me exactly what I needed. I went back to my desk and dug into the public filings for his alleged startup company, Apex Horizon Ventures. The reality was utterly pathetic. Desmond had taken our mother's $500,000 house loan and blown it completely. He bought a luxury sports car, flew first class to tropical islands for networking events that never existed, and dumped the remainder into a highly volatile cryptocurrency that evaporated overnight. The house loan was gone, but that still left a massive gap. The bank was demanding $500,000, plus Francine had maxed out every credit card to the tune of another $250,000 to keep up her wealthy illusion. $750,000 in total debt. She had no other assets. She had no savings. There was only one other pool of money in our entire family, and realizing what it was made my blood run entirely cold. My grandmother, Marjorie, was 82 years old. Before my grandfather passed away, he had set up an irrevocable medical fund for her, designed exclusively to pay for her late-stage care. Francine was the sole manager of that fund. I logged into the state regulatory portal and found the schedule for routine institutional reviews. The state welfare department was scheduled to conduct a comprehensive audit of Marjorie's medical fund in exactly 10 days. The entire trap suddenly made perfect sense. Francine had drained her own house to fund Desmond's delusions. When the money vanished and the bank came knocking, she panicked. Knowing the state audit was approaching, she needed a massive infusion of cash to replace the missing funds before government inspectors looked at the ledger. She did not want my house for an apology. She wanted to sell my house to cover up a staggering crime before she was caught. This was not a family dispute. This was a predator trying to drag me into her cage. I left the office immediately and drove straight to the upscale assisted living community where my grandmother lived. Marjorie was sitting by the window in her private room, looking out at the gardens. She was frail, but her mind was as sharp as broken glass. When I sat across from her, she looked exhausted. Francine had visited her the day before, weeping hysterically, claiming that severe economic inflation had drained the medical fund completely. Francine told her that she would have to be moved to a rundown state facility by the end of the month. It was a completely sick, manipulative lie designed to prepare Marjorie for the fallout. I took my grandmother's hands and told her the absolute truth. I explained the loans, the cryptocurrency, the fake business, and the upcoming audit. Marjorie did not cry. Her face hardened into a mask of pure, icy resolve. She stood up slowly, walked over to a locked cedar chest at the foot of her bed, and pulled out a thick manila folder. My grandfather had taught her never to trust anyone with money, not even her own daughter. She had been secretly requesting duplicate bank statements sent to a private post office box for years. She opened the folder and slid a single sheet of paper across the table. It was a wire transfer authorization. It showed exactly $250,000 moving from her medical fund directly into the corporate account of Apex Horizon Ventures. And at the bottom of the page, where Marjorie's signature was supposed to be, was a clumsy, desperate forgery written in Francine's unmistakable handwriting. I survived a war and built a business, Althea, Marjorie said, her voice dropping to a terrifying whisper. My own daughter will not be the one to bankrupt my dignity. We spent the next 2 hours formulating a trap of our own. I brought in a specialized attorney the very next morning. We scanned every document, every forged signature, and every threatening text message into a secure digital dossier. Meanwhile, in the family group chat, Francine was escalating her performance. She demanded a mandatory family dinner for Friday night at a high-end restaurant, treating it like a royal tribunal where I would be forced to sign the deed over to her in front of all 26 relatives. I typed 2 words into the chat. I agree. Never interrupt your enemy when they are making a mistake. Friday night arrived with a bitter chill in the air. I walked into the private dining room of the restaurant wearing a tailored suit, projecting the absolute calm of a woman who held all the cards. The long table was packed. 26 aunts, uncles, and cousins sat shoulder to shoulder. Francine sat at the head of the table, dabbing her eyes with a cloth napkin, playing the devastated matriarch perfectly. Desmond sat beside her, practically vibrating with arrogant energy, a printed property transfer deed and a silver pen resting on the table in front of him. The moment I sat down, the room erupted. Aunt Patricia called me a disgrace to the family name. Uncle Robert slammed his fist on the table, demanding I stop being selfish and save my mother. Desmond leaned forward, a nasty smirk playing on his lips, telling me that I owed them this, because I had never contributed anything of value to the family. I sat there in total silence. I let them scream. I let them hurl their insults and their venom for 10 full minutes. I needed them completely committed to the illusion. I needed them to firmly lock themselves inside the cage of Francine's lies. Finally, the shouting died down. The room fell into a heavy, expectant silence. Francine looked at me, her eyes flashing with a predatory triumph. "Are you quite finished?" I asked, my voice cutting through the quiet like a blade. I did not reach for the pen. Instead, I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and opened the family group chat. I attached a single, high-resolution photograph. It was a digital collage I had built myself. On the left side was the official notice of default from the bank, showing Francine's unpaid $500,000 loan. On the right side was the wire transfer from Marjorie's medical fund to Desmond's fake company. In the center, circled in bright red, was Francine's forged signature. And across the top, I had typed one simple question in bold letters. Where did Grandma's money go? I hit send. 26 cell phones chimed in unison around the table. I watched as my aunts and uncles looked down at their screens. I watched the profound confusion morph into sheer, unadulterated horror. Uncle Robert, who worked in real estate, zoomed in on the bank documents. His face drained of color completely. The illusion in the room shattered into a million irreparable pieces. Francine gasped, her hand flying to her throat as she looked at her own phone. The mask slipped entirely, revealing the terrified criminal hiding underneath. Desmond knocked over his water glass, stammering, trying to push his chair back from the table. I stood up, smoothing the front of my jacket. "I will not give you the deed to my home to keep you out of a federal penitentiary for defrauding our grandmother," I said, my voice echoing in the dead silent room. "The state auditor arrives on Tuesday, Francine. I suggest you find a very good defense attorney." I turned around and walked out of the restaurant without looking back. By the time I reached my car in the parking lot, my phone was vibrating continuously. The family group chat was imploding. Aunt Patricia was screaming in all capital letters. Uncle Robert called Desmond a parasite. Within 20 minutes, 25 relatives had exited the chat and permanently blocked Francine and Desmond across every possible platform. The only person who did not leave the chat was Grandma Marjorie. Because you do not block the person you are actively suing into oblivion. The following week, the trap snapped shut completely. Marjorie's legal team bypassed the civil courts entirely and handed the forged wire transfer documents straight to the federal authorities. Because the stolen funds had crossed state lines into Desmond's offshore cryptocurrency accounts, it immediately became an issue of federal wire fraud. Federal agents arrived at Francine's house with a warrant on a Tuesday morning. They confiscated her computers, her financial records, and Desmond's ridiculous sports car. Because the state audit revealed the massive hole in the medical trust, Francine was stripped of her role as trustee immediately. With the federal indictment looming, the bank abandoned any pretense of patience. They accelerated the foreclosure process. Francine was officially evicted from her home, her pristine image utterly destroyed, facing mandatory minimum sentencing in a federal precinct for elder estate fraud and forgery. Desmond's accounts were frozen entirely, leaving him with absolutely nothing but the clothes on his back. 2 weeks later, the doorbell rang at my house. I opened the door to find Francine and Desmond standing on my porch in the freezing rain. They looked completely hollowed out. There was no arrogance left, no demands for apology gifts. Francine fell to her knees, weeping, begging me to let them sleep in my guest room because they had nowhere else to go. Desmond stood shivering, refusing to meet my eyes. I looked at the two people who had spent my entire life treating me like dirt, who had tried to steal everything I had built. I felt no anger. I felt no sadness. I felt absolutely nothing but a cold, peaceful silence. I reached into my pocket and handed Francine a piece of paper. It was an itemized invoice for my standard corporate consulting fee, billing her for the 35 hours I had spent unwinding her fraudulent financial web. "There is a shelter 3 miles down the road," I said, my voice completely flat. "Do not ever come to my property again. I closed the heavy wooden door, the sound echoing like a judge's gavel dropping in an empty courtroom, and locked the deadbolt. I walked back into my warm, brightly lit living room. Grandma Marjorie was sitting on my expensive velvet sofa, sipping a cup of chamomile tea, a soft, genuine smile resting on her face. Her medical fund had been secured and insured by the state, and she was living with me now, far away from the toxic wasteland of our former family. For the first time in 33 years, I was completely free. I had a beautiful home, a brilliant career, and a life that no amount of their manipulation could ever touch again. Blood makes you related. Loyalty, respect, and integrity make you family. When the people who are supposed to protect you decide to throw you to the wolves, you do not owe them your warmth. You let the winter take them. Have you ever had to draw a permanent line with family members who only remembered your value when they needed someone to save them from their own terrible choices? Tell me your story in the comments below. Do not forget to like this video, subscribe to Revenge Silent, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another story. Thank you for listening, and until next time, stay strong and guard your peace.